Newt Gingrich here, and I'd like to invite you to listen to my podcast, Newt's World. Most people know me as the former Speaker of the House, but I'm also a historian with a wide range of interests. I enjoy talking with fascinating people who are doing extraordinary things. I release 3 episodes of Newt's World every week, and I want to invite you to listen. Hopefully, we'll both learn something new. Listen to Newt's World on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome to today's edition of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show podcast.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. This is Buck. I'm going to be solo today. My main man, Clay, out on a vacation day. We'll have a lot to talk about here. The future of the GOP, obviously, in the aftermath of the midterm election. House investigations looming. The illegal immigration disaster from our wide-open border continues. We shall discuss some troubling indicators in the economy, inflation. The cult of Nancy Pelosi, will it actually become creepier and weirder than the cult of Ruth Bader Ginsburg was? If you recall, and I'm sure some of you do, because Nancy Pelosi, as we know, is no longer going to be Speaker of the House. She's not even going to run for leadership, and she's basically 80 years old, so I don't think she's likely to be Speaker again. I don't think she's going to run for leadership again. And you'll remember that there was a time when Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was at that time, may she rest in peace, she was a tiny and frail old lady, and there were people who were doing videos of her amazing workout routine, and there were little Ruth Bader Ginsburg dolls being sold, and people talking about how she could do, 1,000 chin-ups with one arm or whatever. No, but there was a cult that built around her because it was about the power of the Democrat Party. And there will be a cult built around Nancy Pelosi as well. In fact, what's funny is here you have MSNBC's Mika of Mika and Joe infamy, saying that unless you are in a cult, you recognize that Nancy Pelosi is worthy of a cult because she is so amazing. Play clip 2.
It's the end of an era and an incredible one. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, it's sort of hard not to be in awe of what she has accomplished, unless you're in a cult.
Unless you're in a cult. So you better join the cult of Pelosi or else you're in the non-Pelosi cult or something like that. It makes absolutely no sense. But Nancy Pelosi, if we're looking at her legacy and leadership, dragged the Democrat Party to the hard left. We all know this. It's obvious. Nancy Pelosi was somebody who was an extremist just on the issue of abortion, for example. Any reason, all 9 months, taxpayer funding for it, all of the above, everything. And would describe herself as extremely Catholic. So, yes, Nancy Pelosi was in so many ways a huge fraud, but she did wield power ruthlessly as essentially the quintessential San Francisco liberal, right? Lives in a super fancy multi-million dollar mansion worth tens of millions of dollars. The good news, though, is that Nancy Pelosi, no longer in leadership, will focus her time on, I'm sure, a number of things, but the pursuit of using non-public information to make as much money in the stock market as possible, because they've been great at that. If you look at Nancy Pelosi's returns, and members of Congress have access to non-public information, somehow Pelosi, if you were mirroring the Pelosi family trades, you've done very well in the stock market. It's fascinating how that happens. She's like a genius. She's like Warren Buffett with longer hair. But this is what we're told. Anyway, the big thing for me last night, though, and we'll talk more about Pelosi a little bit later. And also, if you have any thoughts about the Pelosi era or anything else going on right now, the phone lines are open. 800-282-2882. The meltdown at Twitter is utterly fascinating. And I understand that of the people listening to this on radio or later on in the day in podcast, there's a very small percentage overall of you that are active on Twitter. But Twitter is really the single most for people in the media, for people that make a living in content and trying to spread information, ideas, it is the most interactive. And it's really the only place where the two sides of the ideological battlefield meet in any meaningful way. It doesn't really happen on cable news anymore. I remember growing up watching cable news and shows like Crossfire and, on Fox, they'd have great debates. I remember there are so many, Christopher Hitchens going on Hannity's show and people, all these different names in the past, big debates on TV. Never happens anymore. This just doesn't happen anymore. And so one of the only places where there's actual engagement in the battlefield of ideas is on Twitter. Now, the left, as you know, has had a massive hand on, not even a thumb, like an entire fist pressing down on the scale for their side. And this manifested itself most clearly right before the 2020 election with the infamous, but very, very intentional suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story with the 50 intelligence professionals. Oh, yeah, we're real serious intelligence professionals. Decades and decades of super secret squirrel stuff. We're telling you, that's Russian disinformation. And people all across the country who are honest and capable of independent thought immediately thought to themselves, okay, well, that's ridiculous. It's just some, Oleg and Yuri FSB guys in a basement somewhere outside of Moscow. Well, let's take the photos of Hunter and we'll doctor them so he is almost in the tighty whities all the time with the handgun sometimes, lots of drugs, cocaine, No, that's not actually what happened, as we all know. As good as anybody may think the Russian domestic intelligence service may be at its mischief, the FSB, the Federalnaya Sluzhba Bezopasnosti. For those of you who want to know what the acronym actually stands for. It was not Russian disinformation, as we know. And that itself may very well have made the difference in the election. I think everyone is waking up now more than ever to the reality of what the American political electorate looks like, which is you've got, a mass on one side of the ideological divide, a mass on the other, left and right, lib, conservative, Democrat, Republican, and then this tiny, tiny sliver of people who can be persuaded one way or the other, who may or may not vote. And we are fighting over 1% of voters, basically. All this stuff that you hear going on. And so that's, I think, why there's so much of an echo chamber effect, because especially on the left, they figure if we can just get our message out, blast it out the most, we will eventually win just through the sheer force of words and repetition. So here we are now looking at Twitter, a place where they've had unfair dominance, not through their actual, and there are more libs on Twitter than there are conservatives. That's also true. That's accurate. But they've had active measures taken on their side to make sure that they are more dominant, and understand that the news cycle is often driven. So if you're whether you're a local newspaper subscriber, like my dad still kicks it old school. He likes newspapers, right? He'll fold them out. He can do all that stuff. You give me a newspaper, I get tangled up in it. I look like I'm trying to sleep in it. I can't handle actual newspaper. I'm digital native. So I've been doing, the website since I was a teenager now. That's where I get my news. And here we are looking at how Twitter filters into all these different platforms. Whether you're reading at Old School News, website, cable news, it often comes from that platform. That's one of the first places where breaking news happens. That's one of the first places where ideas start percolating, where the narrative starts getting formed. So it is, in that sense, enormously important. It has been called the assignment editor for the New York Times by many in the past. Twitter, think about that. Biggest, most storied newspaper in America. Obviously also a left-wing rag, but the New York Times, the gray lady, gets its ideas, gets its narrative for the day from this website started by a bunch of, Silicon Valley guys. That's what's been going on now for about the last decade. And so now it is in Elon's hands, and it is epic. It is amazing to watch what is going on here. Mass resignations yesterday. You have people who are exposing so much of what they think and what they really are, both inside and outside the company. For one thing, you have to start with this. You have journos who overwhelmingly have humanities degrees in, communications, God forbid, but it's true, journalism itself, gender studies, things like this, who are smugly lecturing Elon Musk, who is worth $200 billion, roughly, give or take. I guess maybe 150 now because he bought Twitter, but whatever. The richest man in the world who sends rockets into space more efficiently than NASA, who has revolutionized the global electric vehicle market so that electric cars aren't just glorified go-karts. They're actually cool. I've been in Teslas. I got to say, I like them. And it's not because I'm saving the planet from CO2. I just like them. They're really cool. They're good cars. Now, there's a lot that needs to be done with the infrastructure to make sure you got the charging stations and all that. But you have people who have never seen a balance sheet, who would basically describe themselves over a couple of bottles of Zima as socialists, talking about how Elon Musk doesn't know how to run Twitter. Elon's destroying Twitter. Look what he's doing. It's all going down. No, in fact, what you see. Oh, actually, here's a perfect example. A CNN media reporter is just saying Elon is gutting Twitter. He's ruining it. He's destroying it. Play cut 15, sir.
What the hell is going on here? Did he buy a company that he could not afford, or that he does not understand, or that he really didn't want?
I mean, that's the million or $44 billion question. I'm not sure I can get in Elon Musk's head.
The question is there a strategy in all of this?
I think if you talk to people who are close with Elon, they would say that there is a strategy, of course. He wants to improve the platform. He wants to disrupt it and create a subscription service, for instance. It's just that he's moving so fast. He is just breaking everything in the process. I mean, there's something to be said about people who take risks and move fast and break things. But in this case, he is just, destroying the platform seemingly from the inside.
Yes, let's take entrepreneurship advice from a bunch of TV news anchors who truly could not run a child's lemonade stand on a Saturday afternoon on a sunny day. Let's take advice from them. Let's hear what they have to say about this social media platform that has 300 million active users, give or take, and that has been the single, really, in recent years, and by the way, it's because of Trump. People always forget this. Twitter became the center of the news formation universe under Trump because he'd wake up in the morning and he would tweet out 5 things, 10 things, whatever it was. And then that would set the news cycle for the day. You couldn't be in the media and covering the news and not have some idea of what was going on Twitter because of what Trump did. So Trump, ironically, pushed this platform into the stratosphere in terms of relevance. But what we found out was that then they had to shut it down and use it against, or shut him down and use the platform in every way they could for partisan advantage. So what you have now are a bunch of crybabies who, when they get emails from Elon saying you have to be hardcore in your work ethic, they go, oh my gosh, where's my work-life balance? I am used to coming in every day at 11 a.m. with my pet therapist meeting me because I'm obviously bringing in my favorite Shih Tzu along with me. And we're talking about oh my gosh, what are we going to do today? They're all whining and crying and the whole thing. You don't need people like that to run a company. You actually don't. But they infiltrated the HR department, and then they took over the diversity and inclusion department, and then they took over the corporate suite. And now it's all about, how everybody has to get their, vegan sushi rolls made for them for their 3-hour lunches every day. I mean, you could see there are these videos about this. There are actual videos where people show what their day is like at Twitter. So many of you, see, here's the thing. I worked in the federal government, right? I worked in the CIA, which is a massive entity. And there are much bigger ones, obviously. If you work at the Department of Defense, you've worked in a place that's orders of magnitude larger. But you work in a huge bureaucracy. What does everybody know in a huge bureaucracy? Everybody who's there, who's honest, will say, 10% of the people do 90% of the essential work, and 30 or 40% of the people do all the actual work. And then everybody else is just kind of there. This is just true of bureaucracy. Elon is applying that basic logic and understanding, which he knows from running companies and doing amazing things, and the libs are in panic about it. Absolute panic about it. Oh, he's going to destroy the whole company. It's been a couple of weeks. Chill out, libs. How about that? But see, they can't, because they know that once the battlefield of ideas online opens up in a meaningful way, once the accounts get restored, if President Trump wants to come back, Ron DeSantis maybe gets really active on Twitter, you name it. I mean, there are lots of people that have been kicked off, and Ron obviously hasn't been kicked off of Twitter, but there are lots of big names out there who could get really active. So it is a fascinating case study in how they need control, because their propaganda is not persuasive without information dominance, information space and dissemination dominance. And, I'm telling you about all these libs who are just so upset because a lot of them have some kind of a hormonal imbalance. A lot of the guys who work at Twitter need a little bit more testosterone. I want to help them out. I'm a humanitarian. I'm a do-gooder. So I'm going to have to find a way to get a lot of these, I quit, I can't work hard, Twitter engineers some chalk. Chalk helps out with testosterone, which is essential to optimal functioning. And, testosterone levels, not just at Twitter, have been dropping a lot in recent decades. And so if that's true across the country, by the way, because of our diet, environment, everything, more testosterone means more focus, more energy, more drive to get through your day. That's why Chalk has all natural supplements that have a leading ingredient that can increase testosterone 20% in the first 90 days. The male vitality stack from Chalk. That's what you want. You can get 35% off right now when you go to Chalk. That's CHOQ.com. 35% off any Chalk subscription. Just use promo code BUCK in the purchase process at CHOQ. That's Chalk.com.
Newt Gingrich here, and I'd like to invite you to listen to my podcast, Newt's World. Most people know me as the former Speaker of the House, but I'm also a historian with a wide range of interests. I enjoy talking with fascinating people across a variety of topics. On Newt's World, we've had some extraordinary guests join us, like former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger.
Ending the war in Vietnam was a necessity in order to help heal the divisions in the country.
John Clifton, the CEO of Gallup.
The world has been winning the war against hunger for 4 decades. In 2014, it switched. We have a serious hunger crisis.
And House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
What I've really found the Republican Party to be, it's the party of the people, the working people of America.
I release 3 episodes of Newt's World podcast every week, and I hope you'll find my conversations engaging and informative, and hopefully we'll both learn something new. Listen to Newt's World on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
Earlier this month, he gave a choice: work, quote unquote, hardcore, or leave the company with 3 months of severance. It seems like a large amount of people have decided to leave the company. They don't want to work hardcore, and that's thrown the future of this platform into utter chaos. I've been talking to people all day. One former executive who recently exited told me that with all these departures, it's going to be hard just to keep the lights on over there. And so now with all these departures, the people who are remaining, the management has suspended badge access into Twitter's offices, presumably because they're afraid that employees who are technically no longer employed at Twitter could potentially sabotage things.
Oh my gosh, Twitter may all shut down. There's libs, they really just need a cup of warm chamomile and a Xanax or something. Calm down, libs. It's all going to be fine. Yeah, the richest guy in the world, literally the richest man on planet Earth, I think he's going to find a way to keep the lights on without all of the, emotional health gurus over at Twitter pretending to be some kind of necessary cog in that machine. My friends, if you invested in cryptocurrency, it's been rough. It's been a pretty risky investment these days. For all the turbulence we see in the stock market, few markets pose greater risk than the crypto one. Look at FTX. By contrast, one of the safer forms of investment, not just in recent years, but over centuries, has been precious metals, specifically gold. I continue to rely on the Oxford Gold Group for my gold purchases. I've been working with Oxford Gold Group for 6 years now. Gold has been proven to be an excellent hedge against inflation and this uncertain marketplace that we're all living in. Oxford Gold Group will give you expert advice, and they have a best-in-class guarantee for pricing as well. Gold is the way to make sure your investments are on solid footing, and the Oxford Gold Group can help you get there. Call them yourself to diversify your portfolio. Call the Oxford Gold Group today to request your free precious metals investment guide. Toll free, 833-404-GOLD, 833-404-GOLD. Welcome back to Clay and Buck. This is Buck today, rocking it solo. Clay taking a day off, and I think this is a sign of the times here that there's so much in the way of retail theft going on that is now being counted by an individual chain in the hundreds of millions of dollars of losses. People are stealing all the time from stores all across the country. And this is there are major economic impacts of this, psychological impacts to the community, to people who live in these areas, which is pretty much any major city right now. And it doesn't have to be this way. But I want to break all this down in a moment. Target is the store that's getting the attention for this right now. They're saying that organized retail crime is responsible for $400 million in down profits this year. That is the primary culprit they find in this. $400 million in profits because of organized gangs of shoplifters. And I've got to tell you, it's something that is, it needs to be addressed because there are so many second order effects to this. This is in every Democrat controlled city right now. This is a problem. Look, in every city right now, this is a problem to varying degrees. But I can tell you, they even cite in this New York Post piece on this, the Rite Aid at 5th Avenue and 8th Avenue rather, and 50th Street in Hell's Kitchen. Do you know whose Rite Aid that is? Mine. They're actually citing the drugstore that is right next to where I live, that I go into on a regular basis. I want you to think of a number in your head right now. The store closed, by the way. Yeah, it's not my Rite Aid anymore. It closed. Why? Because they were stealing it into submission, stealing from it so that it was not worth it to keep it open. This is where we're not talking about someone taking a straight candy bar because they get a thrill from it or something. These are people who go into stores with often a backpack, a satchel, a trash bag, and they just sweep in. They go to areas. This is all the stuff that you see under lock and key, which are easy to resell and have a relatively high, resale value. Meaning, if you've got a little package of those razor cartridges, for example, in New York City, it'll cost you like $30-40. Well, you steal 10 of those, $400, right? So they're not taking gallons of milk. That's just too cumbersome, and people don't really want to buy gallons of milk from a stranger on the street, but they will buy a closed carton of razor cartridges. They will buy different things that are, skincare products, things that are really expensive. So they go in there. This is not people, despite what AOC had said about this. Remember that? This is not people stealing a loaf of bread because they're hungry. In fact, what anybody who knows what it's like in cities will tell you is that there are more soup kitchens and homeless shelters and homeless services and ways, church and community organizations. There's more of that in a lot of these cities than there has ever been, and a bigger budget going toward it. I mean, in New York City, they keep coming up with new ways to find 4-star hotels in which to place the homeless population at taxpayer expense. In places like California, they're always trying to come up. They just had Caruso just lost to Karen Bass for the mayor of Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is just another one of these places. It should just be the greatest place. I grew up as a kid in New York City watching Beverly Hills 90210 and movies like Point Break and others, surfing. And I just thought that California was paradise. And I actually remember thinking as a kid, one day I'll move out to LA because that just looks like the greatest, most fun version of America to my mind, to my young mind, watching all these movies and stuff. LA is amazing. It's being ruined. The same way that my neighborhood drugstore in New York shut down from theft. And this is in the middle of Manhattan. This is in any of you who have been to Rockefeller Center for, the Christmas tree, or this is a couple blocks from there. This is right in the heart of the tourist district, right in the heart of the city, massive police presence. So why was it shut? Why was the store shut down? Because people go in there and steal and nothing happens to them. Nothing happens to them. Now go look at Los Angeles. Look at San Francisco. Same thing. Karen Bass just won the race there for mayor over Caruso. Caruso came in. He even got Chris Pratt's backing. Chris Pratt from Guardians of the Galaxy and the Jurassic Park movies and Terminal List series, all that stuff. He said, "Look, I'm with Caruso because you got to clean this up. It's ridiculous." I mean, I don't go to LA that often, but I used to spend a fair amount of time out there, especially about 5 or 6 years ago. And, I'd go out there for a week at a time. I was there over Labor Day weekend this year. You see things on the streets there that I'm not even comfortable describing to you what individuals do on the streets there on radio, because I know some of you are with family and got your kids with you. It's appalling. And you have crime all over the place, and people keep, the left-wing Marxist community organizer types. And by the way, Karen Bass, community organizer. Their whole thing is, if we just have more funding, if we just have more, resources for the homeless, we'll be able to deal with this. No, when people are going into, when able-bodied males, by the way, in particular, which is often the case because I've seen it, when they go into a drugstore, when they go into a pharmacy, whatever, and sometimes it's, a Louis Vuitton store. Sometimes it's a place that sells $5,000 handbags. But when they go into even a Rite Aid with a bag and they just full of everything they can, they are stealing for profit. They're not stealing to just feed themselves, because if they just wanted to feed themselves, there's a lot of other options that aren't illegal. This has such an effect on the psychology of the people in these communities. This is so damaging. It's the same thing when you go into, if you're in a really bad neighborhood. So I spent a year and a half at the NYPD Intelligence Division. And part of this was we did some surveillance in some of our cases. And I would go into the neighborhoods in New York that very few New Yorkers that I grew up with in Manhattan and the western part of Brooklyn would ever spend any time on their feet walking around in. And I would go to these neighborhoods and I would see some of the local stores there, and it looked like the local store, depending, especially if it was a liquor store, but even some of the convenience stores were locked down like you were in a prison, because they had, the gate down, and they have maybe bulletproof glass, or they have these things exist in different places. That is so damaging for people in a community to see. It is a reminder all the time. You are not safe here, and people don't feel safe working here. And the business owner, as soon as he can afford a more expensive lease, is going to leave. Now that was in the by the numbers, most dangerous neighborhoods in New York City. But even in Midtown Manhattan, where I've spent a ton of time, I'm a guy who grew up in Manhattan and have lived in Midtown. Even there, that they had to shut down this store, I would walk in and I would see, and I know the store, they talked about this New York Post article very well, and I've been in Targets. I see the kind of stuff that goes on there too. People steal and they know they won't be punished. That makes people who are around them, who see this, who see everything under lock and key, who see the sense of siege that these store clerks are under, because a lot of times people go in there, they'll steal, and maybe they won't try to confront them physically, but there'll be some verbal exchange that often will just devolve into 4-letter word shouts at each other. And they see all this and they say, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to operate a business here anymore. There have to be consequences for this. And I'm also going to say this. people, it's bad. This is something that people don't often think about. It's bad for the psychology. It's bad for the emotional health, if you will. And I really mean this, of the person doing the stealing. You're now a thief. And when you make a habit of this, you're a criminal. You're a person who is a criminal. And you're profiting from this. This creates a momentum that goes often beyond just, I'm filling a bag full of razors from the Rite Aid. It gets worse from there. And this is why in New York, eventually when someone's arrested for a carjacking, that, you know, they shoot someone in, or they anything like, you find out, oh yeah, they've been arrested, 20 times before this. We're not doing people any favors by letting them think that crime pays and they can get away with it. This is a national plague. This needs to stop. Everybody needs to get on the same page with stop people from stealing. There must be consequences. Hundreds of millions of dollars for Target. Millions and millions of dollars for other businesses and stores. You can't even calculate this. It destroys neighborhoods. It brings with it more crime. And this is because Democrats live in this fantasy land where, this is not Les Miserables and people are on the streets just wanting a slice of bread or they're going to die of TB or whatever. That's not what's happening. So it's so frustrating because I've seen this and I see the reality of it. And it has become fashionable for libs, fashionable for Democrats to ignore this stuff. It is destroying neighborhoods. It is destroying businesses. All right, let's switch gears to Stamps.com because they can help out your business so much, make it so much smoother to operate with all the boxes and cards and gifts you're going to start sending off. It's not too late to get your holiday mailing and shipping under control with Stamps.com. Sign up now. You'll be printing your own postage in minutes. This can be a stress-free solution. Stamps.com for every business. Use Stamps.com to print postage wherever you do business. All you need is a computer and a printer. No visits to the post office. When you need a package pickup, you can easily schedule it through your Stamps.com dashboard and then see the UPS or USPS team member show up. Rates are constantly changing, and with Stamps.com switch and save feature, you can easily compare carriers and rates so you know if you're getting the best deal. This holiday season, trade late nights for silent nights and get started with Stamps.com today. Sign up with promo code Clay and Buck for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code Clay and Buck.
Newt Gingrich here, and I'd like to invite you to listen to my podcast, Newt's World. Most people know me as the former Speaker of the House, but I'm also a historian with a wide range of interests. I enjoy talking with fascinating people across a variety of topics. On Newt's World, we've had some extraordinary guests join us, like former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger.
Ending the war in Vietnam was a necessity in order to help heal the divisions in the country.
John Clifton, the CEO of Gallup.
The world has been winning the war against hunger for 4 decades. In 2014, it switched. We have a serious hunger crisis.
And House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
What I've really found the Republican Party to be, it's the party of the people, the working people of America.
I release 3 episodes of Newt's World podcast every week, and I hope you'll find my conversations engaging and informative, and hopefully we'll both learn something new. Listen to Newt's World on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to Clay and Buck. Next hour, we'll be talking about the LSAT requirement. Why does this matter? I will explain it. It's very interesting in just a few minutes. First up, we got Martin in New York. Mr. Martin, how are you, sir?
Hey, how are you? I was a couple months back in the Brewster Home Depot, and I ended up speaking to a couple of the managers and sales associates there. They have a $1 million loss prevention per year in loss and theft. They're not allowed to chase anyone. They have to let everyone walk out. They steal thermostats of $1,000 at a clip. They put them into bags and walk right out.
Yeah. No, I know Brewster pretty well, actually. My grandparents used to have a house up in the Hudson Valley. I'd go visit them in the summers, so I've been through that town many times. And this is, thanks for calling in, Martin. I'm sure all of you have similar stories at stores that, if you talk to the clerks at these places, think about it. Think about the incentives here. I mean, there's really something. This is the self-degradation of a society at work when people are incentivized to steal. You can make much more walking into a Home Depot, let's say, with a bag and filling it full of stolen goods than you will in a week of actually working at that store and adding to your community and providing a service and being a law-abiding, decent person. And so what do we do about this? Well, we're told, but we don't want people to have, a bad record. We don't want people. Isn't it fascinating? Our society now thinks that people should be fired from their jobs in their 30s if they had a homophobic or a racist tweet when they were 14. But we're worried about ruining people's lives who are repeat criminal offenders by actually letting them have a criminal record that stretches back for years. But we just don't want people to know. We don't want anyone to be able to find out, look at the criminality that's in this person's background. Maybe I don't really think that they'd be a great hiring option for me right now, or whatever the case may be. Always trying to make sure that criminality is punished as lightly as possible. This is what the left believes, and they've gotten their way. I mean, I remember growing up and thinking about how and seeing in different shows, people would be arrested for theft. Think about the case at Oberlin College with Gibson's Bakery. A couple of Oberlin students tried to steal. They just figured we'll walk in, we'll just steal bottles of wine, and they won't do anything. Well, that store, it's family-owned business. They had a problem with that. So they locked the door and they said, we're calling the police. And then the college students got physical with them. And you know what the college did? Instead of being horrified that they would have students at I'm guessing $55,000 a year private university stealing from a local business that actually provided catering services to the university. Instead of being horrified at that, because one of the students involved was a minority, this university immediately declared that this small business was racist. Racist. How dare you stop people from stealing from you? And one of them happens to be a minority. Therefore, you are racist. Now, Gibson's, I think, got a $30 million check, completely justified in that, I might add, from Oberlin University. But you see, this just keeps playing out. Where are the basics here? Where's right and wrong? Where's the most straightforward reality with all of this? Randy in Madison, Wisconsin wants to weigh in. Hey, Randy, how you doing?
Calling from the People's Republic of Dane County here. Real quick, back in 2020, I find it ironic that the Biden administration is pushing for the student loan forgiveness, but yet the Biden administration put the moratorium in place in 2020, which for landlords, it hurt us big time for the fact that if the tenant did not apply for the PPP money, the landlord was out. The landlord could not apply for that PPP money. Here in the state of Wisconsin, Governor Evers announcing all this money available for PPP for landlords and tenants, and it's not. It was just for the tenants. Same thing with our Dane County executive here.
Yeah, no, look, they just decided, and they tried to unconstitutionally extend this as well. Thanks for calling. They're trying to extend the COVID emergency still. The emergency powers. We're not in a COVID emergency, but the Biden administration doesn't want to give up the power, which some of us have been warning about all along here. Let's talk more about that. And also the New York Times saying something really fascinating. Hey, maybe the vaccines aren't going to stop this next wave, guys. Just putting that out there. Oh, we know it won't.
Newt Gingrich here, and I'd like to invite you to listen to my podcast, Newt's World. Most people know me as the former Speaker of the House, but I'm also a historian with a wide range of interest. I enjoy talking with fascinating people who are doing extraordinary things. I release 3 episodes of Newt's World every week, and I want to invite you to listen. Hopefully, we'll both learn something new. Listen to Newt's World on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.